conflict in Europe for our next update. And Ukraine's top negotiator, Rustem Umerov, confirms that Kyiv held substantive talks with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff on security and economic issues. These discussions are part of Ukraine's ongoing efforts to secure post-war guarantees and recovery plans. The talks, which took place in Florida, will continue at the World Economic Forum in Davos this week. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President President Zelensky highlighted the very difficult situation in Kyiv as Russia's nightly missile strikes continue to target Ukraine's energy grid. Zelensky stated that 58,000 workers are racing to restore power and heating networks amid freezing temperatures. He also confirmed that his team had held multiple rounds of talks in the United States, focusing on documents needed to end the war. He criticized Russia, doubting its commitment to peace. Let's listen in.
Були сьогодні доповіді нашої делегації з Америки. Рустем Умеров доповідав по зустрічах з представниками президента Трампа. Було вже кілька раундів перемовин. Працюють над документами, які потрібні для закінчення війни. Важливо, що українська команда повністю інформує американську сторону про те, що відбувається в Україні, та про постійні російські удари по нашій енергосистемі. Якщо б росіяни дійсно всерйоз хотіли закінчення війни, вони б зосередились на дипломатії, а не на ракетних атаках, не на блекаутах та спробах завдати шкоди навіть нашим атомним станціям. У нас є дані щодо об'єктів, по яких Росія робила розвідку для ударів. Все чітко говорить про те, що дипломатія для Росії точно не...
Collins joins us once again to discuss the ongoing conflict in Europe's east. Collins, of course, we're seeing diplomacy continue between the United States and Ukraine. Russia, however, holding a limited place to the Davos Forum. We're expecting the next week of diplomatic negotiations to take place. Security guarantees, of course, remains one of the key issues when it comes to ending this war, and of course making, in particularly, satisfying Ukraine's side of the deal. Do you see, at the current stage that we are at in these negotiations, any progress, any substantial progress being made this week between Ukrainian officials and Donald Trump's envoys?
Well, we might see some, certain shifts, especially moving, from this symbolic diplomacy to a more serious phase of negotiations and transactional negotiations. We have seen how talks involving Jared and Steve, they are both in the inner circle of President Trump. And of course, they are directly, we have, direct access to President Trump in terms of the entire peace process. And they are also being seen as one of the key makers, the playmakers in terms of having this credible peace process. We have seen that before during the Abraham Accord, and this will be of great importance. But also from the perspective of Ukraine itself, we've seen how, the situation on the ground has not been encouraging. There's this prolonged fatigue, manpower fatigue, and also exhaustion in terms of the morale as well as economic resilience and capacity to sustain that. And also the risk of this downturn or a plateauing support from the Western nations. And so all these factors have been at the forefront of how Ukraine, and especially Zelensky, will also bring that forward into the peace process. And I foresee that with the inclusion of Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, I think this will be a decisive phase in the process, and that and as I've stated, this Ukraine is not in a positive position now, and the onus and the pressure will be on Ukraine and Zelensky to of course have some, as President Trump has stated, not to prolong or not to drag their feet on this whole process, and which would then be taken as a pretext by Russia to accuse Ukraine of the ones that have been dragging the feet. And this has always been of great importance, especially also in the context of the process in Davos, to emphasize these post-war reconstruction efforts, and that's why I've stated the prospects are more encouraging now to shift the focus to a more prospective and positive avenue of a post-war rebuilding exercises in terms of also providing this long-term relief and all these sensitive and complex issues of the security guarantees, as well as the regions that are still being in control by Russia. And I think this will be worked out with greater effects with the involvement of Jared and Steve.
Colin Shong-Yu-Keat, thank you very much for joining us here on
you,
NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. For our next story, we move over to the United States, and in response